Sorry, sir. I'm afraid the museum's closed to the public.
What's up, friends? Welcome to Mortuary Gaming, your new home for survival horror everything. Starting off the channel, I'm going to be playing through every single survival horror game released on the PlayStation 2. This is the first video, so if you have a good time, please make sure to like and subscribe because this is going to be a hell of an undertaking and I'm going to need all the help I can get. So with that out of the way, let's talk about Curse: Eye of Isis. Curse: Eye of Isis is a survival horror game set in 19th century London, primarily taking place in the Great Britain Natural History Museum. The plot begins on a foggy night in 1890 when a group of thugs steal an ancient Egyptian artifact, thus releasing a curse that envelops the museum in an infectious green death fog. Playing as either Darian Dane or the archaeologist Victoria Sutton, the player must navigate through spooky locations, solve puzzles, combat supernatural enemies, kill a ton of mummies, and uncover the mysteries behind the curse to find a way to stop its malevolent power. The game was developed by British developer Asylum Entertainment, a studio that, until Eye of Isis, was mainly responsible for licensed children's games, which is exactly as weird as it sounds. I had a chance to chat with Simon Bailey, the game's managing director and Asylum Entertainment co-founder, and he was able to fill me in on some details of said development, so huge shout out to him for taking the time. I can't remember the exact year that it started, I think around 2000, 2001, and the development lasted for about 18 months. Really, we would have liked to have polished it for another year, but we did not have the budget to do so. Personally, I was a massive fan of Resident Evil 2 and also Sherlock Holmes, the original Universal black and white monster films, The Mummy, etc., Charles Dickens, etc. That's why we decided to make a Victorian survival horror game. While there was some shooting in the game and of course some scary monsters, it was all pretty tongue-in-cheek and based in the Victorian era, so it wasn't really even as scary as Resident Evil. Initially, our ambitions for the game were turned down by Electronic Arts and then pretty much turned down by everybody. In the end, I'd almost given up before we signed the deal with Xanadu, a French publisher. The budget they had to share with us was not really enough to do a AAA title like we wanted, so we had to try and make the best game we could with the resources we had. Getting a highly polished, good-looking and playable game on a relatively new platform was challenging for us. We had only undertaken small children's titles before, so we were very lucky to get the opportunity from Xanadu. Big shout out again to Simon for taking the time. There'll be some more of him later in the video, but for right now, let's get into the gameplay. Let's get into the nuts and bolts. What is Curse: Eye of Isis like in its gameplay experience? The first thing I noticed when I started playing the game was what I considered to be a really wonky camera system. It's not fixed in a traditional sense like many other survival horror games, but instead it follows you and it slightly shifts regarding what the player is doing, which sounds nice and all, but in this particular game, for development reasons I personally don't have the experience to understand, you end up having to learn to continually fight the controls. You walk straight, you're going straight, then the camera begins shifting and now the character turns and you're walking into a wall. Instead of doing what survival horror games have trained you to do, which is just continue to hold the same button regardless of the camera, you have to continually be aware of the camera and fight the analog stick or D-pad to go in the right direction. It kind of feels like when you're driving a car and your tire alignment is super off, so you have to keep turning the steering wheel to one side to offset that misalignment, so you end up holding the steering wheel off center the whole time you're driving in order to keep going straight. I hope that makes sense. That's exactly what the controls feel like. I think a lot of this is really more a problem of the era, I mean, games were trying to evolve from the stiff tank controls of previous titles and do something a bit more fluid and modern, but they don't really get that right here, and I don't necessarily think that's their fault. They're going for something new, and I like that. It just didn't quite stick the landing. Another thing that is super not awesome is that the character turns their head anytime there's anything interactable nearby. Take Silent Hill 2, for instance. James only turns his head when there's an item or object he needs to pick up or use, and clearly the same head turning was pulled from games like that and supposedly with hopes of evolving it, but unfortunately it just kind of makes the head turning animation a bit pointless. Another really odd thing about this game is the menu. Now, I like the menu UI quite a bit. I think it's a bit corny in a kind of early Windows Media Player skin kind of way, but I'm into it. I like that the developers seem to genuinely try something different here other than the standard square box we're used to in survival horror games of the time. One of the coolest things about Eye of Isis, however, there's going to be a lot of that. There's a lot of this thing is really bad and this thing is really good. And that's kind of what I like about this game. But one of the coolest things about Eye of Isis is how the aiming and lock-on system work while in combat. So press R1, I think it's R1, maybe it's R2, whatever, the aim button. You press the aim button.
Come on, shoot him! Shoot him, shoot him, shoot him!
And immediately lock onto an enemy. Then you have to stop moving, wait for the aim to center properly as indicated by the colored dots coming together in one spot. Then you can shoot and land an accurate shot. This is so cool. And playing a survival horror game where I can walk backwards up a staircase with my weapon securely and unwaveringly locked onto an enemy and being able to shoot them with confidence and accuracy makes for such a fun and unique combat experience, especially for a game this early in the 6th generation, especially for a game that's a survival horror game. Maybe there are other games that do something similar in this genre, but I'm only like 5 titles into playing like 30 some odd games on this system. So, I'll find them later, or you can let me know in the comments. Now, that's not to say the combat is perfect. It is not perfect. There are plenty of encounters or boss fights, especially when you're using the truncheon, where you can just stand there and f***ing bonk them. Just bonk them and lock them into an animation. Bonk them and lock them over and over and over again. This would happen once in a while, but overall, you do have to put some thought into when you shoot, when the enemy is reloading, strafing when an enemy is about to shoot you, stuff like that. For most enemies, though, it's really just a matter of shoot, strafe, repeat. But I think it works. More often than not, this game just works.
All of this just works. I'm not kidding.
And that feeling of the game just working is one that I had often during my time with it. I love how this game just works. For instance, while on the boat in the midsection of the game, I ran out of room in my inventory, hadn't saved in a while, and I had a new task. Then I realized I needed to move something out of my inventory but didn't have the ability to simply drop items. I get nervous because I can't remember where Abdul, the human save point and item mule, was, and I had no idea what I was facing around the corner. So then I turned the corner and bam! Dude just showed up, took all my shit, saved my game, and everything was A+ again. That happens a lot. I love the way they just make little things like this work.
And again, it just works.
The death fog that the enemies produce also plays a big role in combat. You have to end up kind of strategically placing where you're standing after an enemy dies and emits his ectoplasm, because he could be standing on one end of a hallway and you can't get through to the other end of the hallway without taking damage if there's a bunch of death fog in the way. And that brings me to the story, which we haven't really talked about a whole bunch. Cinematic presentation overall is really fun. Generally, it's pretty easy to cruise through, and it keeps things refreshing enough to never really make the game feel like a slog. Little changes of pace are scattered around the game, little chase sequences, character changes, new enemies, stuff like that, and I really appreciate that. Right before I started feeling fatigued, there would be something new around the corner, and it very naturally captured my attention and kept me going for reasons other than this challenge to play every PS2 survival horror game. There's a slew of great things like that and changes of pace and curse, and it speaks to a level of care put into the game not often seen in obscure titles like this, especially of the time. The story isn't anything particularly bold, but it was delivered with an earnest sense of period and did so really well. The writing, particularly in the item descriptions or just descriptions of things you can interact with, is incredibly flowery and actually like really good writing. There exists a solid contrast between the kind of nihilistic world of a game like Resident Evil and the period drama tone of Eye of Isis. For example, in Resident Evil, you're in a beautiful mansion. Everybody's cold and calculated. The item descriptions are cold and objective, but that is exactly how Resident Evil should feel. It's a crucial part of its tone. Meanwhile, over in Curse Eye of Isis, a homie literally is like, wow, the workmanship of its gilded interior really takes your breath away. Whenever you see like a beautiful piece of art or an item with some historical significance, because you are in a museum after all. So there's always something intriguing like that and carefully well-written descriptions, and I really appreciate that. I don't know why, it just sticks with me. I thought it was really refreshing, and it's little things like that that make me love this game.
I kicked that map into the creek yesterday. It was useless. I kicked that into the creek.
All right, the map. We have to talk about the map. My God, what a disaster this map is. Nothing on the map actually identifies the areas within it. So you have a load of empty boxes. You can't even see the entire map, by the way, or other areas of the map outside of your vicinity. It's just a vicinity map. It's a mini map. And the reason the map is such an issue is because of how massive your environment feels. At the start of this game, you're given a huge area with more doors than your body has room for. Almost all of them are locked, and there aren't any words written on your map, so I can't remember where anything is in relation to where I am. I'm not the most directionally gifted human on the planet, I'll give you that.
Which way are we walking?
That way.
Dude, we're in the middle of the woods.
But this really tested my patience at times, especially as someone with a lot of experience in survival horror maps. To make matters worse, specifically on the boat section of the game I mentioned earlier, a big plot point is to get to the cargo bay. Got it, cargo bay, no problem. You find the cargo bay door, it's locked. Cool, that's no problem. I'll go find the cargo bay key. Then you go to a door marked cargo bay, and that one is jammed. But wait, I thought it was locked. Oh, so there's 2 doors to the cargo bay. So then you find the cargo bay door, a 3rd cargo bay door, also jammed. There are 3 doors to this location, and you can only unlock 1. But then you find the key, and you wonder, wait, where was the one I found earlier that was locked that I needed to use the key for? Let me check my map. Oh, right! There's no writing on the map! This happens so often, and it makes, oh my God, it turns like a potential feeling of autonomy and accomplishment into one of exasperated relief.
It's done.
While speaking with Simon Bailey, managing director of the game, he mentioned some shortcomings of the game and things he would like to have seen differently as well. We would have loved to have polished the game for another year, refining the control, combat, NPC behavior, adding some quality, improve the art, add some more fright, some better puzzles, etc. Now, it really is a tragedy that they didn't get the time and budget necessary to make these things happen before release, because while I think the NPC behavior is totally passable, janky and not great, but you know, for a cult fun title like this, I think it's passable. And I really like the combat. As I said, the puzzles were really something that could have used some work, specifically at the end of the game. You get these awesome cinematic set pieces, really cool shots of interesting levels. Then right at the climax of the story, you're on the edge of your seat and you're faced with a gauntlet of the easiest, mind-numbingest, sloggiest puzzles that do nothing but shove a giant series of speed bumps in your way right as you're getting to the big finale. And then you get there and you're handed a pointless twist ending, a cool looking boss, and then that's it. That's the end. Not exactly leaving on the strongest note, but hey, you made it this far for a reason, and even though I had to finish it to make this video, I never really felt like I was grinding for that reason. I genuinely had fun, and I think people looking for a deep cut survival horror game will share a similar feeling of enjoyment. Yeah, the puzzles are really bad. Curse Eye of Isis was released on Windows in October of 2003 and Xbox in April of 2004. The game was also released on the PlayStation 2, but only in Europe. Regarding why the PlayStation 2 was never released stateside, Simon Bailey had this to say. The publisher Wanadu had their own financial issues and in the end had to sell the rights to the game to another publisher. It also took Wanadu a long time to be able to get an American distribution deal. I think they sold the Dreamcatcher in the end. We never received a single penny in royalties. Smiley face. For those of you who may not know, Wanadu was an internet service provider who in 2006 became Orange SA, a multinational telecommunications corporation. Pretty weird, Definitely one of the more unique companies to release a video game that I'm aware of, much less a AA zany survival horror game. Now, there are 2 different covers for the game, as was the norm at the time between PAL and NTSC. The PAL art looks like this. Maybe not the best art, but you've got what you need. You've got the characters, you've got the death breath fog, and a creepy thing in the corner. I don't know what that is. The NTSC cover art, on the other hand, wow. Look at this f***ing 2000s radio rock ass cover. This looks like a Korn shirt. This looks like the album cover for someone's demo CD they were handing out in the parking lot of Taste of Chaos. Everyone seems to think the key to selling a product to Americans is by amping up the violence and the action. And as an American, yeah, this cover kind of f***s. Sales figures on the game are non-existent, but judging how hard the game is to find and how little we know about it, it's probably safe to assume they weren't incredibly high. And that is a shame, because if I would have played this game when it came out, I would have been all over it, especially as a kid. It's goofy, it's bloody, it's colorful, it's zany, and all of these things work in the same way that a lot of my favorite death metal albums work. You know, it's just got this kind of fun, goofy, dark, not really violent, tongue-in-cheek aesthetic that I just think is really unique. It's really special. So yeah, regardless of the map, regardless of the game's shortcomings, regardless of the doors, why are there so many doors? I think this game genuinely kicks ass, and I really hope more people check it out. So yeah, that's it. First video done. Thank you so much to Simon for talking to me, and to all of you for watching this video. I will be playing every single PS2 survival horror game, so hit the subscribe button, ring the bell for more underground nastiness, and I'll smell you later.